Some of the most interesting research on consciousness is being filtered out knowingly, influencing therefore the public's awareness and preventing you from finding it. Okay, so in this video I'm going to get a little serious, but it's important. This is something I feel from my heart, and this is about the narrative that is out there about consciousness, the potential for consciousness to survive physical death, and in general the narrative or the paradigm that we're in, where we have placed science as the only authority in knowing. Most of us, especially people that find this kind of content, believe we're open-minded because we read, we do research, and knowing what the internet is like, we do check facts. But there's a deeper question I want to invite you to sit with whilst you watch this video. Who decided which ideas about consciousness are acceptable and which are dismissed before they're even explored? Because when it comes to consciousness, the soul and the possibility that awareness may not end with the physical body, many people don't realise how strongly their thinking has already been shaped before they've even begun to think about it themselves. Now, I'm not talking about belief, I'm not talking about religion, and I'm certainly not talking about rejecting science, not at all. What I'm saying here is by reclaiming curiosity and learning to recognise when curiosity itself has been quietly discouraged. Because that is what is happening. We're being taught to not think for ourselves, but to accept what someone else believes. Now, most of us didn't consciously choose our worldview, we absorbed it. From parenting, through education, through culture, through what we were told counts as credible or serious or acceptable. And through fear, we've allowed that to run. Especially in the Western world, that dominant assumption is that consciousness is produced by the brain, and when the brain stops, consciousness ends. And many of us, for fear of not wanting to look silly, accept that idea. But that idea is rarely questioned. And this is what's important to understand. That position of consciousness doesn't survive death is not scientific fact. It's philosophical framework labelled materialism. Materialism has been incredibly useful. It's given us medicine, technology, a deep understanding of the physical body, for example. But usefulness is not the same as completeness. Even with neuroscience and philosophy of the mind, there is still no agreed explanation for something so very basic, which is why subjective experience exists at all. Now, this is known in science as the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains unresolved. Minds greater than mind cannot explain how it is, for example, that cells exchanging electrical impulses can give rise to ideas or images such as an orange. What are dreams, for example? That is a reality that you are in a lot of the time, and when you're in it, it is so real. You can't say it's not a real experience. It is, especially whilst you're in it. It's the only experience. So it's clear then that certainty begins to soften when we open up our mind and accept that we don't know everything. And there are some things that people experience that are real. We just don't have a scientific explanation for it. Now, this brings me on to where platforms such as Wikipedia, for example, come into the conversation and the mainstream narrative. Now, I'm going to use Wikipedia as an example because it frustrates me because I see it being quoted so often. And I think people generally understand now that Wikipedia isn't probably the most credible resource, but it's a great example to show how this narrative is just widely put out there as fact, that consciousness doesn't survive physical death, put out as fact. So Wikipedia presents itself as neutral and factual. But structurally, it prioritises mainstream consensus, materialistic interpretation, and sources that fit with the narrow philosophical perimeter. And as a result, entire peer-reviewed research, especially around consciousness, are routinely labelled pseudoscience and framed as fringe or excluded altogether from the platform. Not because the research doesn't exist, because it does, but because it's challenging the assumption that mind must be produced by matter, Now, I'm not talking conspiracy here. This is philosophical gatekeeping. And many researchers working in these areas have spoken openly about the resistance they encounter, even when their work meets rigorous scientific standards. And I've met many of the scientists in this field to satisfy myself that no, we don't know everything. The experiences I have are not deluded experiences, they're real experiences. Why isn't science looking at this? Why doesn't it feel able to look at this without feeling threatened? That's always been my questioning. And it turns out scientists are looking at it, and there is science and there is research that would give us a sense of peace, even if nothing more, and yet it's not put out there. Let's be clear about something. True pseudoscience avoids testing. It avoids peer review. It avoids scrutiny. And that's not what we see in serious consciousness research. For example, Dr. Julie Beischel and her scientific research on mediumship. Dr. Julie Beischel holds a PhD in pharmacology. She is a co-founder of the Windbridge Research Centre. Her work investigates mediumship using triple-blind protocols, strict controls for fraud, cold reading and sensory leakage. She's peer-reviewed in publications such as Explore, the Journal for Science and Healing, and her conclusions are careful and measured. She's not jumping to conclusions. She does not claim to prove survival of consciousness after death, but her research demonstrates that some mediums are able to produce accurate, specific information under controlled conditions that cannot be easily explained by current psychological or sensory models. Now, whether someone likes the implications of those findings or not, that is still legitimate scientific finding. And then we've got Dr. Arnold Delorme and his consciousness and the brain studies. Dr. Arnold Delorme is a cognitive neuroscientist with extensive peer-reviewed publications in EEG, meditation and consciousness research. He has published in accepted journals, including Neuroimage, Frontiers in the Human Neuroscience, and his work has been co-authored in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. His research explores the neural correlation of consciousness, non-ordinary states, and the limits of purely reductionist brain models. God, it's so hard to remember all this. Again, the conclusion is not certainty, it's humility. That's what I like about him. He's not saying he knows something, he's saying he's finding something that's incomplete, and he's putting it out there so that other people can research it too, but it just gets dismissed. No, the research that people produce like this isn't being dismissed because it's sloppy. They're destabilising certainty. If consciousness is not fully produced by the brain, if awareness may not be entirely local or reducible, then our understanding of life, death and identity must expand. And this is what my whole work's about, because expansion can feel threatening and I want people to feel safe. Dismissal is easier than curiosity. It does take a brave person to want to look at reality and see it for something more than it may be that we understand. Labelling something as pseudoscience closes the conversation. It's like, well, that's it, we've found a nice label for it, we'll move on. But science isn't about enclosing inquiry, is it? Science is about looking at things we don't understand. So why are we not looking at the fundamental part of ourselves? We all know we're conscious. And then what's more is science doesn't grow, does it, by closing inquiry? It grows by following evidence. So even when that evidence asks us to rethink what we thought we knew, the whole purpose is that we still have the bravery, have the open-mindedness to look at it. So where does the soul fit into all of this? Because I'm not talking religion here, I'm not talking doctrine, I'm not talking belief. The soul doesn't need to mean anything mystical or dogmatic even. I see the soul as energy. It can simply mean that the deeper continuity of consciousness, the part of us that experiences, witnesses and remains present beneath thought, personality and story may go on. Exploring the idea doesn't require belief. It simply requires curiosity, self-honesty, authenticity and a willingness to explore experience directly. not just intellectually. And this is where I come in, because I'm sharing with you direct experience over 30 years now of consciousness exploration. I can give you what the scientists haven't got yet. I can give you information, knowledge, wisdom. I can share insight on what it feels like to be having experiences with consciousness that go beyond the norm. And why is this important? It's important because many people who explore more, it doesn't lead to fear. It leads to greater meaning, deeper compassion. It softens their relationship with life and death, giving them comfort, giving them hope, giving them impetus to be able to live at a much fuller level, more expanded. And more importantly, you don't have to look outward for ultimate certainty. We don't need to put the answer or power in the hands of someone else. I teach that your soul is intimately connected with your body, and your body already knows when something resonates as truth. Before the mind decides, the nervous system responds. The body softens or it tightens, the heart opens or contracts. There's a felt sense of alignment or not. Now, this isn't mystical language, this is introception, the body's ability to sense internal truth. And when we learn to stay in communication with ourselves, with our body, our felt sense, our inner awareness, we develop a reliable inner compass. We can turn to self. Now, you might call that intuition, you may call it embodied knowing, gnosis, you might call it the soul speaking through the body. You don't need to believe anything blindly. You can always return to your own lived experience as a truth radar. Once you get in contact with the soul, you have a GPS system, all of your own, that's going to guide you forward and keep you on the truth, in authentic living, empowered. And perhaps that's the safest, most empowering place to be, or to begin even. Your curiosity isn't a flaw. It may be your soul quietly reminding you that there is more to discover. I'm Claire. I'm a soul expert. I help people understand their eternal soul nature. I help them understand relationship through the depth of soul connection, and I help them understand their life purpose through the journey of the soul. I teach on all sorts of esoteria and spiritual awareness. If you want to know more, click that follow button. Leave me a comment, engage.